Well, good afternoon and welcome to Great Sacred Music. My name is Natalie and I'm a soprano with St. Martin's Voices. Today we are going to lead you through a sequence of music inspired by this week's theme on English composer Edward Bairstow. Edward Bairstow was born exactly 150 years ago today in 1874 in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. As an aspiring musician, he studied organ and theory at the University of Durham, receiving his bachelor degree and doctorate from the institution. He finally settled as the organist at York Minster in 1913, where he happily held the post until his death. He appears to have been rather notorious for his bluntness. When asked whether he would be willing to follow the example of his predecessor at York, Thomas Tertius Noble, and emigrate to the US, he replied that he would rather go to the devil. As a former York Minster chorister and Durham Uni goer myself, I completely understand his connection to the northern parts of the country. You have just heard Jesu, the very thought of thee, with words attributed to Bernard of Clairvaux, a 12th century monk and theologian. This short anthem reflects on the beauty and sweetness of Christ, emphasizing the deep spiritual connection between the believer and Jesus. This setting appears to have a particular emotional depth, highlighted through lyrical lines and a largely homophonic setting. Well, it is tradition at Great Sacred Music that we begin by singing a hymn together. The King of Love, My Shepherd is a text written by Henry Williams Baker in 1868. The text reflects on the words of Psalm 23, providing the theme of God as a shepherd, leading his followers, the sheep, with his rod and staff to verdant pastures. This text has been set to music by many great composers through time, such as John Rutter, Pretorius, Gounod, and Arthur Somerville. Today, though, we sing the text to the traditional Irish tune, St. Columba, which was first paired with the specific text in the English hymnal in 1906. You are invited to remain seated as the voices stand and lead us in The King of Love, My Shepherd is. Our next piece of music, Save Us, O Lord, was written by Bairstow for the Festival of Wigan and District Church Choral Association in November 1902. This connection to Wigan came from his post of organist at Wigan Parish Church from 1899 to 1906, before moving to the other side of the Pennines to Leeds Parish Church. You may recognise the text from the service of Compline, a service of quietness and reflection at the end of the day. The words that Bairstow sets are sometimes said in this service, but often sung in beautiful plain chant. Guide us in our waking, O Lord, and guard us in our sleeping, that awake we may watch with Christ, and asleep we may rest in peace. This particular setting by Bairstow, which you're about to hear, lends itself to the setting of the text. The tonal clarity, along with the typical repetition of important text from Bairstow, helps us to focus on our plea of protection addressed to God. Bairstow also uses the dynamics extremely literally too. Do listen out for the louder phrases when the text discusses being awake, which contrasts with the quiet, more Compline-like phrases of when we are asleep. Here is Save Us, O Lord by Bairstow. In my humble opinion, you're about to hear one of Bairstow's best works and one of my favorite pieces of all time. Blessed City, Heavenly Salem is a text taken from the 7th century and translated from Latin to English by John Mason Neale in approximately 1851. The text derives from a 10-stanza Latin hymn, Urbs Beata Jerusalem, which literally translates to Blessed City of Jerusalem. Bairstow sets stanzas 1 to 4 and 7 of the 6th century chant and has not been the only composer to do so. Henry Purcell began the obsession with this text when he set the words, "Christ is made the sure foundation," to his extremely catchy hymn tune. Bairstow's setting begins with the best organ flourish in musical history, perhaps providing imagery for the great grandeur of the city of God. We then move through many musical textures, from angelic heavenly singing from the sopranos to a more pronounced dramatic opening of the pearly gates by the tenors and basses. Perhaps the most vivid change comes when Bairstow sets the text for "Many a blow and biting sculpture." This dramatic musical canvas is sung in homophony, where all the parts sing the same words at the same time to emphasize the magnificent structures created by the Lord. When I sang this piece as a child, I always used to think that this musical setting told an excellent story. I hope you do too. Here is Edward Bairstow's Blessed City, Heavenly Salem. Well, it's now time for us all to sing again. The 17th century Latin hymn, "Jesu grant me this, I pray," is set to music by Orlando Gibbons and arranged here by Bairstow. This hymn is often nicknamed Song 13, as when it was originally published in 1623, it was hymn number 13 in the oldest known hymnody, George Wither's Hymns and Songs of the Church. Bairstow's craftsmanship in this arrangement of Gibbons's hymn is evident. An original first verse, followed by a beautifully ethereal soprano descant for the second verse, provides an element of safety to the temptations provided by the world. Sweeping independent phrases express temptation of the flesh in verse 3, while the darkness created in verse 4 through the text brings us to terms with our own mortality. The voices lead us while we remain seated for "Jesu grant me this, I pray." Well, thank you very much for joining us this week for Great Sacred Music. There is an opportunity for you to donate on your way out to support the music making at St. Martin's. You can also find other ways to donate, which are detailed on the back of your sheet. You can join us at this time every week on a Thursday for Great Sacred Music at 1 p.m, or if you can't join us in person, you can find us on our streaming platform, stmartins.digital. We also have our sister program, Choral Classics, every Sunday at 3:15. Our final piece this week is Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence. The text dates back to AD 275 and was originally written in Greek as a cherubic hymn for the Divine Liturgy of St. James. More recently, the text is used at the celebration of the Eucharist on the morning of Holy Saturday, when the bread and wine make their way to the altar. Bairstow's setting does a wonderful job of bringing together both the emotional and spiritual significance of the text. The slow unison of men's voices at the beginning of the anthem tells us to stand with fear and trembling in a theatrical manner. The text is then passed to the soprano voices, who slowly introduce harmony to lift ourselves above earthly thought. The harmony and texture continues to build until all the cherubims, seraphims, and angels come together to shout Alleluia. Bairstow's setting most definitely reflects the transition from our solemn contemplation of Jesus and his work to participating in the exaltation of the heavenly hosts. Thank you for joining us.